I returned to the lake house one late afternoon, when mist still clung to the surface of the water, and all I wanted was a few quiet days. But the door wasn't locked. From inside came laughter, familiar laughter that made my chest tighten. I pushed the door open and froze. On the bed where I used to collapse after long shifts, Lila, my sister-in-law, was fast asleep, wearing the nightgown I'd left behind. Out in the living room, her whole family was raising glasses to celebrate a birthday. No one noticed me until Lila opened her eyes, looked straight at me, and said, her voice thick with wine, "Someone with money but no one who needs her is just a parasite." I didn't yet know that night they wouldn't just invade my home, they were about to take the deed to it too. Light from the bedroom window slipped through the beige curtains. On the vanity, my perfume had been replaced with Lila's cloying, sugary scent. The framed photo of my parents and me on the porch was now on the floor, replaced by another Ethan and Lila's wedding picture. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my chest as I set my hand on the dresser's edge. Dust had gathered there. The smell of alcohol, perfume, music, and laughter blended into something foreign that took over what had once been my peaceful refuge. I walked out of the room without another word. Eyes followed me shallow, a little defiant. Lila leaned back in her chair, her tone stretching like a thin string. "You showed up unannounced, Casey. Not very polite." I forced my voice to stay calm. "This is my house, Lila. I don't need an appointment to walk in." She shrugged, smiling faintly. "Sure, it's yours. On paper. But Ethan's your brother, right? Just imagine if one day, the name on the deed changed." Some guests laughed, their glasses clinking. I didn't answer. Instead of arguing, I turned and stepped out onto the porch. The lake reflected the deep red of the sunset. The wind carried the scent of damp wood from the dock. Everything was still beautiful, still calm, just no longer mine in the way it used to be. I drove home that night. The road along the lake stretched silent and long, the hum of the engine mingling with my thoughts. There was a moment when I let out a breathy, disbelieving laugh at how foolish I'd been. 10 years of work, every dollar saved, every bit of effort all traded for contempt from my own family. When we were little, Ethan had followed me everywhere. Every time he fell, he'd call, "Wait for me, Casey." I still remembered those pale blue eyes and how I once swore I'd always protect him. Maybe that's why, all these years, I could never say no. When he said he was marrying Lila, I was genuinely happy. "She seems gentle," I told Mom. She smiled. "Lila comes from a good family, knows how to take care of herself. Ethan's lucky." I didn't know that from that moment on, his life and mine would spiral into endless demands. Their wedding was held at a seaside hotel. White flowers lined the path. I remembered the drizzle that day. Lila stepped on her gown, her voice sharp as a blade. "Don't let anyone see me with wet hair, Casey. Go get someone with an umbrella." I ran across the beach, holding a large umbrella, soaked to the point my makeup washed away. The wedding cost over $20,000. Ethan said, "Just this once, sis. I promise I'll pay you back." I believed him because he was Ethan. 3 months later, they asked to move out. I co-signed the lease for a 2-bedroom apartment, even paid the 3-month deposit. When Ethan lost his job, Lila said, "I wasn't born to work for others. A good man should provide for his wife or have his sister do it." I heard that through the phone, during my afternoon shift. I laughed, because if I didn't, I would have cried. I started paying their rent every month, $1,500 for 12 straight months, month after month. Each time I wired the money, I told myself it was temporary. Ethan would get back on his feet. They'd be fine. But temporary is the most deceptive word in the world. Then came the car. Lila said she needed a vehicle worthy of a Bennett woman. I co-signed that loan too, not wanting Ethan to lose face. And Lila, when she got the keys, smiled and said, "I won't forget this, Casey." She was right, she didn't forget. Just not the way I hoped. A year later, Ethan texted, "Sis, you still have savings, right? I just need a few thousand to manage for now." I read that message over and over. In the end, I agreed. I added his name to my account. I didn't realize that moment I gave him the right not only to withdraw money but to slowly drain my trust. Mom always said, Family is for sharing. If you have something, you help. I'd heard that line so many times it became habit. But no one ever told me that when you keep giving, one day you'll have nothing left to keep. After leaving the lake house, I made a cup of mint tea. The warmth spread through the air, but not through me. I opened my laptop and stared at my bank statement. Each number glared like a cut rent, car, wedding costs, small unnamed transfers. More than $50,000 in 2 years. I sat still, hands cold as stone. The phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Lila says don't take it personally. She was drunk, just talking nonsense. Don't make a big deal. A moment later, another text. Anyway, that house belongs to the family, right? That line choked me. The family. Once it had sounded warm, now it felt like a theft in plain words. I thought about my hands, the hands that had touched so many patients' smiles, fixed broken teeth, restored confidence. Yet those same hands couldn't hold on to respect in my own family. When the clock neared midnight, I saw a missed call. From Mom. Her voicemail played gentle, distant. Casey, I heard from Ethan there's some misunderstanding. Don't be too harsh. Family is about compromise. Lila's young. She doesn't know better. Don't let a small thing hurt your bond. A small thing, that's what she called being thrown out of my own home. I stood in the dark, gripping the railing until my knuckles turned white. I'd been a fool to think kindness could anchor loyalty, and maybe that was the moment I knew for certain nothing would ever be the same again. Those words dropped into the room like a stone into a lake, sending cold ripples through my chest. This house, you're only holding it for me. The words came from Lila's mouth, laced with a soft laugh and a mocking look, making it clear the last boundary had been crossed. She wasn't just invading my space, she was declaring war. I looked around, new ivory curtains I'd never seen, strange paintings on the walls, a lace-covered dining table, wine glasses scattered beside half-empty bottles of champagne. Lila moved about, showing off each corner to guests filming on their phones, her tone proud like a true homeowner. I'm thinking of knocking down this wall, maybe adding a window facing the lake. A house needs light, needs space to feel worthy. A middle-aged woman, probably Lila's aunt, joked. And Casey? She's fine with that? Lila laughed and glanced at me. She'll give in sooner or later. Family means sharing, doesn't it? In the corner, Ethan held a beer, eyes averted, pretending to be deep in conversation. I didn't want a public fight, but in my head, the last pieces of patience were cracking apart. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands trembled slightly, but steady enough to start recording. The lens caught the chaos, the laughing guests, Lila by the fireplace, holding a glass of red wine, saying to someone, "This house needs a full remodel. I want to turn it into a private retreat for my family. Ethan says the paperwork will be done soon." Paperwork? I frowned but stayed silent. I kept filming every detail, every word, as if some instinct told me I'd need them later. "Casey," Lila suddenly called out, drawing out my name. "Don't stand there like someone who's lost something. Everything's just going back to where it belongs." She stepped closer, her heavy perfume swirling around me. "Don't act all righteous," she murmured, "just for me. You don't know how to share, but I do. I know how to make everything revolve around me." A brief silence, then I nodded and smiled faintly. "Yeah, I see it. You did well, Lila." Then I turned and walked out the door. Outside, the night wind circled the lake, cold and sharp. I stopped for a moment and looked back at the house, warm yellow light spilling from the windows, reflecting over the dark surface of the water. It looked cozy, but to me it was nothing more than a stage where I'd just been pulled off without mercy. As I opened my car door, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Please don't make a scene. I'll talk to Lila later." Later, when the house was already in her name, I turned off the screen and started the engine. The road back to the city felt longer than usual. Streetlights flashed across the windshield, each beam sliding over the steering wheel in quick intervals. I thought about Ethan's eyes earlier, not defending me, just tired, resigned. He was still the little brother I once knew, only now he chose silence to keep his peace. Outside, the rain began to fall. I sat still, listening to the drops tap against the window frame. I was no longer in a position to let anyone dictate my kindness. The next morning, I arrived at the clinic earlier than usual. The first sunlight streamed through the wide window, shining on the empty row of waiting chairs. In the familiar scent of antiseptic, I made a cup of coffee, took a sip, and opened my laptop. My phone lay beside me, still on silent mode. The screen showed more than 10 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Ethan. I didn't call back. Near noon, while I was reviewing a patient's file, there was a light knock on the door. Miles, my colleague of many years, peeked in, holding a stack of papers. "You forgot to sign last week's files. I'll just leave them here, okay?" "Thanks. I had something come up last night." He looked at me closely, then asked, "You all right? You look different." "I'm fine. Just learned a small lesson, that's all." That afternoon, I drove straight to a law office. The young attorney looked up and asked, "Would you like me to send notices to the other parties?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I want them to find out on their own. Sometimes, saying nothing lands the deepest." I started the car and headed toward the city. In the rearview mirror, the sunset stretched across the road like a thin streak of fire, and I knew everything was just beginning. Sitting in front of my computer, I opened the list of automatic payments, each line clear as an unhealed wound. I scrolled to auto payments. The cursor stopped at the first line, Ethan's rent. I looked at the number, took a deep breath, and clicked cancel. A soft click echoed. Then came Lila's car payment, then the extra credit card, then the shared account I'd foolishly given my brother access to. When I was done, I typed a short message and sent it. "If I'm the parasite, let's see who's living off whom." I set the phone down, leaned back in my chair, and listened to the wind whistle through the window frame. For the first time in years, I felt like I was actually in control of something. The next morning, as I was getting ready for work, my phone started vibrating non-stop messages, calls, social media alerts. I didn't need to check to know who they were from. It wasn't until my lunch break that I finally read them. The first was from Ethan. "Casey, what happened? The landlord says he hasn't gotten the rent. Lila's car got repossessed this morning. Did you forget to transfer the money?" I typed quickly, without hesitation. "No." I stopped. Silence. Then, after a few minutes, another call came in. I let it ring until it ended. Then another message followed, longer, more desperate. "Casey, please talk to me. Lila's freaking out. The landlord's threatening to kick us out. I don't have money right now. You can't do this. I'm your brother." For years, every time Ethan said, "You can't do this," I gave in. But this time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't reply. That night, the phone lit up again, not from Ethan, but from Lila. I didn't open the message, but the bitter old woman, jealous, lonely woman. I recognized some familiar names among the people who liked her post: relatives, my mother's friends. They read, shared, and commented as if I were the villain. I wasn't angry. Maybe because I knew they'd only heard one side, and Lila was an expert at playing the victim. I placed the phone face down on the table, poured myself a glass of wine, and drank slowly. The burn slid down my throat, leaving a metallic taste on my tongue. I wondered how many times in my life I'd chosen silence, thinking it would keep the peace. How many times I'd believed patience was love. Now I knew some silences only teach people they have permission to step on you. The next morning, Ethan called again. His voice was hoarse, weary, not like usual. "Casey, we got kicked out of the apartment. The landlord said the lease is only under your name and they don't want to renew it. We have 3 days to move out." "Yeah, I know. I filed to end the lease last week." "You did that without telling me?" His voice broke. "Just like you let them throw a party in my house without telling me." I heard him take a shaky breath, then he said quietly, "Lila went too far that night. She didn't mean to insult you." "Didn't mean to?" "She called me a parasite, Ethan, in the house I bought." "Casey, please don't take it to heart. I'll talk to her, okay?" "No need." Just focus on finding a place to live. I hung up before he could say anything else. My inbox filled with messages from unknown accounts, insults, mockery. Clearly, Lila had rewritten the story. A stingy, selfish sister-in-law with no compassion. A few old friends reached out privately, asking, "Is it true?" I didn't answer anyone. I saved everything: screenshots, posts, comments, the short videos she uploaded showing that party in my house, captioned, "My happy little family by the lake." It was no longer a private feud between sisters-in-law. Lila wanted to humiliate me publicly, turn me into entertainment. But she forgot when someone's cornered, they stop being afraid of being seen. I began saving every piece of evidence, every trace she left online. When the clock struck midnight, I leaned back in my chair, listening to the rain outside. The blue glow from the screen lit my face. In the glass reflection, I saw my own image, tired eyes, but clearer than ever. 2 days later, Mom called. Her voice trembled. "Casey, I heard from Ethan. You stopped paying for the rent, and Lila's car too. Did you really do that? I just took back what's mine. But they're struggling, honey. Ethan lost his job. Lila hasn't found a new one. You can't abandon your brother like this." "Mom, I supported them for 2 years. I don't owe anyone anything." "But family's supposed to depend on each other, Casey. Family doesn't mean one person has to fund everyone else's selfishness." There was a pause on the other end, then a sigh. "I know you're angry, but you're the eldest. Don't let this go too far." She waited a moment, then added softly, "Fine, I'll talk to Ethan, but I hope you'll reconsider." I knew she didn't understand, maybe she never would. To her, every conflict could be smoothed over with patience. But I wasn't the 25-year-old daughter who once believed silence was the only form of love. I knew this wasn't over. Lila wasn't the kind to stay quiet. But I wasn't the old Casey anymore. Now I was just waiting for her to make one more wrong move, and when that happened, I wouldn't have to say a word. The truth would speak for itself. That day, I arrived at the clinic earlier than usual. My body moved out of habit, but my mind felt wrapped in fog. The coffee on my desk had gone cold, and the patient file on the screen blurred before my eyes. Each time I closed them, familiar faces flashed through: Lila's cold stare, Mom's tense expression, Ethan's pleading and accusing messages. I thought I was used to exhaustion, but maybe this was the first time I truly felt tired. I was washing my hands at the sink when Miles knocked. He'd worked with me for years, a man who didn't talk much but noticed everything. "Casey," he said in a low voice, "one of your patients canceled this morning. Take a break. I made fresh coffee for you." I smiled faintly, drying my hands. "You should open your own coffee shop, Miles. You'd have plenty of customers." He shrugged and pushed the cup toward me. "Yeah, but I'd miss you." The words were light, but they made my heart skip a beat. I took the cup, trying to hide the small smile that formed. I'd always kept a distance from Miles. He used to be a forensic specialist before switching to dentistry a few years ago. Meticulous, precise, and with a kind of silence that made people trust him. I liked him, but I'd never said much. I returned to my desk and tried to review the patient files, but when I pulled a drawer out, a stack of papers fell to the floor. Miles bent down to help me pick them up, then froze at a color-printed sheet. He looked up at me. "Casey, do you know what this is?" I leaned over and saw the paper he was holding. It was a copy of the title report showing a transfer of ownership note. In the lower corner, my signature was blurrier than the original, and the bank seal looked like it had been machine printed. I had never seen this copy before. "Where did this come from?" I asked, my heart starting to race. "In your financial file. Someone pinned it into the insurance papers, probably while you were away." I took the paper. The smell of fresh ink lingered. The faded words seemed to taunt me. Transfer of ownership of 50% to Ethan Bennett. No way. I never signed this. I used to investigate legal records, and I can tell you this signature is a digital copy, not handwritten. "You mean someone forged my documents?" "Very likely. And that person must have at least one copy of the original document, or access to where you store your files." I remembered I'd sent Ethan a scanned copy of the house papers when he wanted to learn how to manage assets. I thought it was harmless trust between siblings. Now, everything had suddenly become evidence against me. Miles, if someone took this to the title company or the county recorder's office, what could they do? If they had a notarized, certified copy and some other forged documents, they could start transfer procedures. Your house might no longer be in your name. I need to know how far they've gone, I said, forcing myself to stay calm. I have to check with the bank. I'll come with you. If it's fraud, I can help you work with the legal department. The bank was downtown, about a 10-minute drive from the clinic. The sky was overcast that day, black clouds rolling as if foretelling a storm. When I presented my papers, a senior title officer, Patricia, a woman I'd worked with for years, immediately invited me into a private room. She looked at me, her voice trembling slightly. "Casey, you came at the right time. We were about to contact you." Patricia opened her computer and skimmed through some files. Last week, someone submitted a copy of this transfer document, requesting Ethan Bennett's name be added to the ownership record for the lake house. The file wasn't completed because we needed to verify your original signature. I turned to Miles. He gave a small nod, telling me to stay calm. "Who submitted it?" I asked. Patricia hesitated. "A woman. She claimed to be a family representative and came with Ethan Bennett." I didn't need more to know who that woman was. Lila appeared in my head, the half-smile, the confident look from that night at the lake house. "Can I see the file they submitted?" Patricia handed over the packet. There was not only the transfer document but also a financial guarantee agreement, clearly stating, "Casey Bennett agrees to transfer asset management to her brother in case she cannot meet tax obligations or maintenance costs." Below it was a signature mine. Though the forgery was skillful, I could still see differences in the curves and spacing of the letters. Heat rose in my wrists, anger threading through my veins. "Patricia, can you prepare certified copies and file a report with the title insurer's fraud unit and the county recorder? We suspect these documents are forged." Patricia nodded right away, eyes full of concern. When she left the room, I sank into a chair and clasped my hands. I trusted them. I even sent them a scan of my house files. And now, they plan to take it for real. You're not stupid, Casey. You have trust. But sometimes trust needs protecting like an asset. When Patricia returned, she placed a report in front of me confirming that all transactions related to the house had been temporarily frozen. I said nothing on the drive away. Miles broke the silence. "I've seen many forgery cases, but rarely has anyone been that brazen toward their own family. Maybe because they don't see me as family anymore." The car moved through crowded streets, but inside me everything was quiet. Thoughts gathered into a single arrow. I would not let them take anything else. The next morning I went to the lawyer's office before dawn. The damp, cold air made my breath turn to thin smoke. The high-rise across from the bank reflected the early sunlight, sparkling but cold, like my mood, painfully lucid. The lawyer Miles recommended was Rebecca Hale, a middle-aged woman, small in stature but with a gaze sharp as a blade. When I told her the story, Rebecca didn't seem surprised. She flipped through the pages, nodded slowly, and said calmly, "This isn't rare, Casey, but it's rare for a victim to have as much clear evidence as you do. You have video, forged documents, bank corroboration. We can do a lot with that. I don't want a scandal. I want my property back and to stop them from doing this to anyone else." Rebecca smiled. "Then we'll proceed quietly. I'll petition the court to temporarily freeze any transactions related to your property and file a complaint of document forgery with the notary office. You don't need to confront them directly." That afternoon, returning to the clinic, Miles called to say he'd sent copies of the entire file to the lawyer. He joked in a gentle tone, "I'm no fighter, but when it comes to paperwork, I can make people fall apart with a stamp." I smiled faintly. "I trust you." Across the street, a woman in a red dress eerily resembling Lila walked by, laughing with a friend holding an expensive coffee. I wasn't sure if it was really her, but the discomfort crept up my chest like a long, cold streak. Lila still lived carefree, spending as if the world belonged to her. I suddenly remembered I hadn't canceled all my old cards. There was an authorized card I'd opened for Ethan to use in emergencies. That night, I logged into my bank account. The transaction list stared back. $5,200, Delmore & Co. Jewelry Store, $3,800, Sea Pearl Restaurant, $1,400, Lakeside Inn. Same day, same card. I stared at the numbers, my finger hovering over report fraud. But I stopped. Another thought flashed. I wouldn't cancel that card. I would let her spend a little more, to map out her own trail of guilt. I picked up the phone and called Rebecca. I have fraudulent transaction evidence. But I want to monitor more. Can the bank track that authorized card? Rebecca paused. What are you planning, Casey? I want to see. If someone digs a pit for another, will they fall into it themselves? Rebecca agreed. She contacted the bank, and within 2 hours they had set up automatic tracking for all transactions from the authorized card. I watched the screen as the name Lila Monroe kept appearing on the electronic receipts. Each charge was a clear, stupid breadcrumb. A week later, Miles walked into my office and put a file on the desk. News police contacted Rebecca. She's being monitored. They're just waiting to gather enough evidence. I nodded slightly, feeling not joy but relief, the lightness of someone finally seeing a way out after being pressed down for so long. That night, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Lila's planning a weekend party. She says it's to prove everything's fine. I don't know if I should go. I typed a short reply. Go if you want, but keep your distance. Things may change soon. 3 days later, on Saturday, the sky was unusually clear. I stood on the apartment balcony holding a warm cup of tea. The clock read near 7 p.m. when Rebecca called. Casey, they're ready to act. The police have a warrant. Do you want to be there? Yes. I want to see it with my own eyes. When I arrived, the light from the lakeside villa shimmered on the water, dazzling like an illusion. Cars parked tight along the drive. Music played, people laughed, glasses chimed. I stood at a distance, on the other side of the oak trees, where the darkness hid half my face. She stood out in the crowd, a pale yellow dress hugging her figure, a pearl necklace far too large to be tasteful. In her hand was a glass of champagne, and beside her was Ethan, forcing a smile. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but from the way Lila wrapped her arm around my brother's shoulders, I knew she was still playing the part of the successful wife, the woman in control. A waiter passed by, and I borrowed his polishing cloth to cover half my face. No one noticed me. They were lost in their own noisy world. But a few minutes later, that scene was torn apart by the flashing red and blue lights in the distance. Sirens echoed across the lake. The music stopped. Voices turned to murmurs. Then the villa doors burst open, and 2 police officers entered, their voices firm and clear. City Police. We have a warrant for the arrest of Lila Monroe Bennett for financial fraud and document forgery. The glass in her hand slipped and shattered on the floor. Ethan turned, his face pale. I saw my mother in the crowd, trembling as she stepped forward, her lips moving soundlessly. The officers read Lila her rights, then cuffed her in front of dozens of stunned onlookers. She struggled. You're making a mistake. I'm Ethan Bennett's wife. That house belongs to us, one officer replied firmly. That property legally belongs to Casey Bennett. You're being arrested for falsifying documents to seize assets. The flashing lights illuminated Lila's face, highlighting the mix of panic and rage. Ethan just stood there, frozen. From a distance, I watched the police car slowly drive away along the lakeside road. Its red light reflected across the water, leaving a long streak, the final cut, sealing every lie. Miles walked up and gently placed a hand on my shoulder. You okay? I watched the taillights fade and answered softly. Yeah. It's just so quiet, after all those years of noise. After the night Lila was arrested, the city felt strangely still. Her posts vanished from social media within hours, as if she had never existed. But inside me, the echoes of that night remained, the red and blue lights on the lake's surface, my mother's strangled sobs, and the image of my brother kneeling by the porch, drained of all strength. I thought I'd feel relief, but I didn't. It was more like the ache that lingers after a tooth is pulled. The wound cleaned, yet the emptiness still hurts. 3 days later, I got a call from Rebecca, my lawyer. She said the police were expanding the investigation because some of the forged signatures might not belong to Lila alone. Casey, Rebecca said seriously, you need to prepare yourself. I've reviewed the report. There's one signature from Ethan. What did you say? On the authorization form submitted to the bank, the transaction representative line has his signature. They're checking whether Ethan knew what he was signing or just followed Lila's lead. Part of me wanted to believe he'd been manipulated. But another part, the one that remembered his silence when I was humiliated in my own home, whispered, he knew. Can I see a copy of that document? I asked. Rebecca promised to send it right away. That afternoon, the file arrived. It was Ethan's handwriting, the same signature I'd helped him practice as a kid when he applied for a scholarship. I'd once said, "You write neatly and firm." Now that same handwriting sat beneath a cold line, authorizing Lila Monroe Bennett to conduct all property transactions on behalf of Casey Bennett. A cold draft slipped through the door, scattering papers across the table. I folded the file, trying to stay composed. Maybe Lila had tricked him. Maybe he hadn't read it carefully. But if that were true, why had he stayed silent through the insults, through the invasion of my home, through everything? I called Miles. He arrived 15 minutes later, jacket slung over his shoulder, eyes filled with concern. What happened? I placed the file on the table. Look. He flipped through a few pages, then exhaled slowly. It's real. No sign of coercion. So he knew, I said, my voice breaking slightly. He didn't console me, didn't deny it. His silence hurt even more because it meant the truth. The next day, Ethan called. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't slept in days. Can we meet? I hesitated, then agreed. We chose a small cafe in the suburbs, far from anyone we knew. I arrived first. When Ethan walked in, I barely recognized him, wrinkled shirt, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. I spoke first. You really signed that paper, didn't you, Ethan? He lowered his head. I did, but I didn't know what it said. Lila told me it was just a temporary verification form to handle property taxes. I didn't read it carefully. I kept my voice steady. Didn't read it carefully? A document about my property and you didn't read it? I saw his hand trembling under the table. You also took money from my account, didn't you? Ethan looked up, startled like a child caught stealing. You know about that? I know, and I want to hear it from you. He took a shaky breath, his voice small. I only borrowed it. Lila pressured me, said you wouldn't notice. A few hundred each time. Sometimes she said she needed it to pay a card bill or put a deposit on jewelry. I thought you had plenty of money, you wouldn't care. I planned to pay it back, I swear. A few hundred each time? It added up to over $15,000, Ethan. You think I can't count? I looked at the brother I once protected, the one I helped buy an engagement ring, the one I believed would never betray blood. Now, in that noisy cafe, all I saw was a weak man hiding behind the excuse of being pressured. You know what hurts the most? It's not the money, not even the house, it's that you stood there in silence while someone insulted me. You stayed quiet when they called me a parasite. You watched and said nothing. Ethan's eyes were red. You think I don't regret it? Since that day, I haven't slept. I lost my job, my friends, even Mom's trust. I just want you to forgive me. I looked at him for a long time. Maybe I'd once thought I would soften, like before, but this time, all I felt was exhaustion. I can't save you anymore, Ethan. This time, you'll have to face the consequences yourself. Please, I didn't mean to. I was just stupid. Yes, you were. But stupidity comes with a price. Behind me, I heard a chair scrape and a faint, broken plea. Please, Casey. I kept walking. Weeks later, Rebecca called with the final update. The case was closed. The court ruled Lila guilty of forgery, but confirmed Ethan had carelessly signed the authorization, nearly allowing the transaction to go through. The bank held him responsible for the legal fees. Ethan was fired from his company over the scandal involving his personal accounts. They said anyone who could sign financial documents without reading them couldn't be trusted. The rumor spread faster than I expected. Some mutual friends messaged me they'd seen Ethan sell his car and move back in with Mom. Mom called, her voice shaking. "Can't you help him, Casey? He's lost everything." "Mom, some things have to be lost before people realize what they had. If I help him now, he'll think everything's still fine." "He's still your brother." "I know. And because he's my brother, I won't let him sink further." Everything in my apartment stayed the same, only people had changed. I thought about Ethan, about everything that had happened. Despite the anger, I still hoped that one day he'd understand. Love can't exist without respect. I thought things would end after Lila's arrest, but they didn't. Every storm leaves an echo, and this one reached back into the house I once called family. I heard about Lila's release from Mom. That morning, I was arranging flowers on the dining table when the phone rang. "Casey, they let Lila out." "I know. She has nowhere to go," Mom continued. "So, your father and I let her stay here for a while." "Stay with you?" "Yes." Ethan asked for our help. "Just for a few weeks, until she gets back on her feet." I pictured the woman who once stood in my living room calling me a parasite, now standing in my mother's small kitchen, giving orders. In my mind, I could almost hear her voice sharp and sour, like vinegar hitting hot water. 3 days later, Mom called again. "Casey, are you busy?" "I'm listening, Mom." "You were right. Lila is a snake. Since she came back, this house hasn't been peaceful for even an hour. She complains the kitchen's dirty, makes me clean it again and again, says the chairs are too hard, the curtains too old, then wants to replace the entire dinner set. She even made your father take the chairs outside to get morning sunlight for better health. His back hurts, but he still tried." Mom sighed. "She talks like she's giving orders. After eating, she won't wash the dishes, says, 'You do it. My hands get dry from detergent.' Casey, I'm exhausted." "You used to take her side," I said softly. "Now you know how I felt." On the other end, I heard Mom's choked sob, the scrape of a chair across the floor, then silence. I didn't feel cruel or vindicated. What I felt was like watching an old wound finally scab over it, still hurt, but it no longer bled. From that day on, I stopped calling home. I knew if I interfered, everything would repeat. People only change when they're forced to face the cost of their own choices. One afternoon, while I was reviewing a patient's file, Miles knocked on my office door, holding 2 cups of hot coffee. "You look different, calmer." I smiled lightly. "Maybe because I'm learning to see things without always stepping in." "I heard about Lila from Rebecca?" "Yes. People only realize the value of peace after they've lost it for long enough." I never told anyone that Mom still texted me regularly. Today she made me cook separately because she doesn't eat fried food, or, "Your father just came back sore after she made him carry heavy groceries." I read every message, and replied with one short line. "You once believed she was good, now you need to learn how not to." About a week later, I got a call from Ethan. "Can we talk?" "What's going on?" "Lila moved in with Mom and Dad." I moved out. Ethan's voice grew heavier. "I thought I could fix things, but she never changes. Every day I see more clearly what I've lost. You still have a chance to start over. But this time, don't let anyone use your love to control you." On the other end, Ethan sighed quietly. "I know. I just hope Mom can let go." "She will. Anyone who holds onto thorns too long eventually learns to release them or bleed." The next day, Mom called again. Her tone was different, low and steady. "Casey, I talked to Lila this morning. I told her she needs to find another place. She got angry, said awful things, but I'm not afraid anymore. I won't let this house become a place where everyone bows their heads." "I'm proud of you, Mom. I wish I'd listened to you sooner," she said, her voice softening. Sometimes people don't recognize who's good for them until everything falls apart. At the end of the month, I drove past our old neighborhood and saw Mom in the yard, hanging new curtains. Her figure looked small under the sunlight, but her eyes held something I'd never seen before, the clarity of someone who'd finally woken up from a long sleep. From a distance, I saw Lila step out the front door, dragging a large suitcase. Her face still carried that familiar arrogance, but her eyes showed defeat. Mom didn't walk her out, she just stood there, one hand gripping the doorframe. I couldn't hear what they said, but when the taxi drove away, Mom sat down on the stone bench and lowered her head for a long time. I started the engine and drove on, leaving behind the image of a woman who had finally chosen peace for herself. The wind brushed through the trees, scattering yellow leaves across the road. And I realized some things don't need revenge. Given time and truth, everything finds its own order again. For me, all that was left was to move forward without hate, without looking back, light enough not to let the past weigh me down again. 2 months passed since the day Mom finally threw Lila out, and life slowly fell back into quiet rhythm. I kept working, going to the clinic, spending weekends at the lake house when the air was still. But sometimes, in my dreams, I still saw Lila, her eyes burning with anger and fear. It didn't hate her, but her presence lingered like a faint ink stain that could never be erased. One early April morning, as I was setting up dental tools for my first patient, the phone rang. It was Ethan. His voice was tired, hoarse, as if he hadn't slept. "Casey, I filed for divorce." I froze, letting a glove slip onto the tray. "Are you sure?" "I have no other choice. She's lost everything, Casey, no assets, no job, no one left." I didn't ask more. If Ethan said that much, it meant every door between them was closed. At lunch, while I was eating with Miles in the break room, he handed me his phone. "You should see this." On the screen was a new social media post titled, "I owe my sister an apology." Below it was a long paragraph from an account named Lila Monroe, written publicly. I once looked down on the person who helped me the most. I thought I was smart and strong, but I was just a parasite sheltered for too long. Casey Bennett, if you're reading this, I want to say I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, only that people know I was wrong. Hundreds of comments and shares followed, some sympathetic, others angry. I looked at it for a while, then locked the screen. But rumors still spread. In a small town like this, nothing stays hidden. A week later, a patient told me Lila was living with a man named Darren, one with a record of domestic violence. "I heard he's a heavy drinker," the woman said as I removed my gloves, her voice mixed with pity and curiosity. "That Lila, she used to be so beautiful, so fancy. Now you wouldn't recognize her." I didn't comment, but that night, driving down Main Street, I saw Lila myself. She was standing outside a convenience store, wearing a dirty gray coat, holding an old phone. Her once smooth hair was tangled, and a faint purple bruise marked her wrist. Beside her stood a large, gaunt man yelling at the car that wouldn't start. I didn't stop. I drove past, the streetlight glinting off the windshield, showing my reflection clearly in the glass. A week later, my phone rang close to midnight. I'd just turned off the living room light and hadn't yet gone to bed. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice froze me. "Casey, it's me. Don't hang up," she said quickly, her voice breaking through the wind. "I know I don't deserve to talk to you, but I have no one left." Ethan won't answer. "Your mother hates me. I got kicked out, and Darren, he hit me." I heard her ragged breathing, the sob she tried to swallow. "I have nothing, Casey. No home, no money. I'm begging for a chance, even just help finding a job, a place to stay for a while." Her voice weakened, almost trembling. "I know I deserve the hate, but please, I'm scared. I've never been this scared." I leaned against the table, eyes fixed on the window. Outside, the pale moonlight touched the distant lake. I remembered the years when I too had been surrounded by fear, loneliness, and the feeling that no one could save me. But I stood up. I rebuilt from nothing, and I never stepped on anyone to survive. "Lila, I've been there. I know what it means to lose everything, but I saved myself without using someone else as a lifeline." Casey, please. I hung up, not out of cruelty, but because I knew if I reached out again, she'd only drag me down with her. The night wind from the lake carried the scent of cold water and wet grass. Moonlight spilled softly across the railing, reminding me of the first evening I bought this house when I still believed happiness meant having someone to share it with. Somewhere out there, maybe Lila was curled up in a cheap rented room, or sitting on some damp doorstep, clutching the life she'd ruined herself. I didn't wish her pain, but I didn't pity her either. Because I knew everyone pays for what they've done, in their own time and way. That afternoon, the sky over the lake glowed a gentle orange, calm as a breath. I stood in the yard, hands still stained with paint, looking at the freshly dried walls. The lake house was different now, no trace of the storm that once tore through it. The walls were cream white, the window frames olive green, soft and warm. On the porch, the lavender I'd planted 2 weeks earlier had begun to bloom, its scent floating lightly in the breeze, faint but steady. The hum of an engine sounded outside the gate. I recognized it immediately, Miles. He stepped out of the car, holding a folder and 2 cups of hot coffee. The same calm look, the brown jacket creased at the elbows, eyes carrying that quiet steadiness that somehow made others feel safe. "Been working all day?" he asked, handing me a cup. "I'm used to it. Besides, finishing these walls feels like washing away old memories." He looked around, nodding approvingly. "I have to say, the house looks alive again, just like its owner." I laughed, glancing at him. "Is that a compliment or sarcasm?" "Whichever you prefer," he said lightly, though his eyes held unmistakable warmth. I sat on the porch steps, the scent of coffee blending with lavender in the air. Miles opened the folder and placed it on the small wooden table between us. "I brought this for you." I leaned closer. The first page bore the clinic's logo. Below the bold heading was a blank line for a signature. "Partnership proposal. Casey Bennett." "What does this mean?" He smiled, fingers interlaced. "The board approved a new shareholder expansion." "I put your name forward," they agreed. "You did?" "I just reminded them of what everyone already knew," he said sincerely. "Without you, the clinic wouldn't have survived those chaotic months. And honestly, I'd like to run it with you." For the first time since everything ended, my happiness didn't come from escaping someone but from walking forward with someone else. I was about to thank him when he pulled another envelope from his pocket and set it beside the folder. "One more thing. You should know this," he said quietly, his voice gentle but deeper, more real. "Remember you once asked who sent the anonymous report to the bank?" I nodded. "It was me." The rustle of the wind outside suddenly sounded sharper. I stared at him, speechless. He continued, his tone soft, as if recounting something long past. "That day, I saw you at your desk, hands shaking as you signed the property freeze documents. I knew you wouldn't ask for help. So, I did it for you. I never told you because I knew you needed to stand on your own." I lowered my head, touching the warm cup in my hands. The heat spread through my palms, real, grounding. There was so much I wanted to say, but all of it gathered into a single smile. "You were quietly on my side all that time, weren't you?" Miles didn't deny it, he just smiled. The wind from the lake bent the lavender stems. The sunset spread across the wooden porch, bathing us both in a soft golden hue. I looked at him, eyes glistening. It took me a long time to understand what family really means. But maybe you're right, family isn't just where we're born, it's where we're seen, heard, and never used. I leaned back in my chair, my voice barely above a whisper. I used to think losing family was the worst thing. Miles turned toward me, waiting. I looked out at the lake, where the sunset melted into the water, and said slowly, clearly, "But losing the ones who used you, that's real freedom." Miles tilted the coffee pot, refilling my cup. The soft sound of liquid pouring was like time itself. The breeze carried the faint scent of flowers, and in that moment, I realized peace isn't when everything is perfect, but when you're strong enough not to let anyone hurt you again. The sun disappeared completely, leaving only thin golden ribbons across the lake, flowing like silk at the end of the day. I closed my eyes and listened to the gentle waves, my heart light as if everything that once weighed me down had finally been released. Now, whenever I sit on the porch watching the sunset over the lake, I still think about everything that's passed, not with sorrow, but as a reminder that peace often comes after necessary loss. Life, after all, teaches everyone to let someone go so they can find themselves again. If you've listened this far, tell me, where are you watching from? Have you ever had to let someone go to find peace? Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe so we can share more stories like this together.